Bran's breath came in quick gasps as he hovered in the half-space between dream and waking, skin prickling with cold despite the warmth of the furs covering him. Somewhere in the distance, the voices called. They were faint echoes carried by the wind that whipped around the heart tree, moaning through ancient branches, stirring the snow that clung stubbornly to the trunk. The heart of the weirwood was alive with memory and promise, pulsing in Bran's vision like a red star in a white sky. He stretched out with his mind, weaving between the roots of time and myth, searching for the one thread that could unravel a war before it ever started. He felt the presence of the three-eyed raven, or what remained of that ancient being, guiding him, a gentle pressure that told Bran he was both the one in control and the one being tested. For so long, he had feared these glimpses into the past. He had brushed against stories of how a whisper in the old halls could change fate. Now he recognized that fear as the gate he had to pass through. The stories told that small actions in the past might echo through centuries, toppling dynasties. But none had warned him how personal it might be. As the swirl of vision and possibility bled into color and shape, he saw a young man's face. Rhaegar Targaryen. The silver-gold hair whispered across pale skin. The prince's gaze, dark and thoughtful, rested on something Bran couldn't quite see. There was a quiet sadness to it, a regret, and as if guided by an unseen hand, Bran followed that gaze and saw the faint silhouette of a woman. Lyanna Stark, fierce and beautiful, fresh as winter's first frost. Her cheeks glowed, her eyes shone with defiance and pride. Somewhere, beneath the grove of ancient trees in the godswood of Winterfell, a spark of affection grew, slight as an ember in a dying fire. Bran could almost taste the moment's gravity. He realized this was a turning point. He had studied the threads of history in his half-waking dreams, how Rhaegar's attentions had set ablaze the passions that led to Robert's rebellion, how each misstep had unspooled into a war that drenched the Seven Kingdoms in blood, how that war eventually claimed both Rhaegar and Lyanna, leaving behind the seeds of new conflict. He had to do this carefully. The hush that accompanied him in these visions was both comforting and terrifying. Every word he tried to speak thrummed with possibility, as though the entire realm held its breath. The scene shifted in a swirl of red leaves and drifting snow. Bran saw the courtyard of Winterfell in a different time, decades before his own birth. Rhaegar stood as a royal visitor, a reluctant participant in a tournament the Northern Lords had arranged in his honor. Lyanna leaned against a wooden pillar, half hidden by shadows, watching him. Bran had read of the Harrenhal tourney. He had heard glimpses of how the Crown Prince had once crowned Lyanna as the Queen of Love and Beauty, spurning his own wife, Elia Martell. Yet, in this memory, the stage was different. If Harrenhal had been the grand orchestrator of rumor and heartbreak, Winterfell was its intimate cousin, quieter, but no less fateful. The pull of time felt stronger here, like an eddy in a stream that threatened to swallow everything if disturbed. This was a moment so delicate that if he changed even a small thing, the entire saga could sway a different way. He had come to do exactly that. In the swirling half-light, Bran found himself standing behind Rhaegar. The prince could not see Bran's spectral form. This was how it always was. Bran moved in these visions as though an invisible observer, sometimes able to nudge or whisper in the cracks of men's minds when the weirwood power was strong. He felt the pounding of Rhaegar's heart, the tension in the prince's shoulders as he prepared for a simple spar against one of the North's best swordsmen. Lyanna was in the stands, her eyes fixed on him. The hush in the courtyard was tinged with anticipation. Bran inhaled slowly. If he succeeded, if he did this precisely, maybe events wouldn't spiral into the tragedy he knew. There would be no rebellion launched by Robert Baratheon, no war that tore houses apart. His father, Ned, would not lose half his family in the bloody conflicts to come. Elia Martell and her children might live. Everything could be different. Yet would that difference be for the better? The hush in his mind seemed to ask him, "Are you ready for what follows?" He pressed onward. A wisp of thought, a murmur, a breath. He wasn't sure how much Rhaegar would perceive, but he tried to shape a gentle notion in the prince's consciousness. Caution, respect for northern customs, an awareness of the fragile line he walked when dealing with House Stark. A single shift in Rhaegar's manner, an extra show of courtesy, a small reluctance to press forward romantic impulses. Bran felt the faintest ripple pass from his mind into Rhaegar's. It was like releasing a droplet into a still pond. The effect was subtle, nearly invisible, but Bran could sense it. And so the vision unraveled further. Rhaegar stepped into the sparring circle with the grace of a trained fighter. His silver hair danced in the breeze as he faced an older knight who served House Stark. The onlookers watched with polite interest. Bran saw Lyanna leaning forward, curiosity in her eyes, but no flame of perilous fascination. There was something new in the angle of Rhaegar's shoulders, a guardedness that might have otherwise been absent. He was not performing for her. He was not trying to impress or provoke. He was simply a prince doing his duty. The steel sang as the two men exchanged blows. Rhaegar was skilled, everyone said so, and his movements were efficient, refined. Yet the older knight's heavy strikes made him yield ground. Rhaegar gritted his teeth, determined not to be humiliated, but equally determined to show respect. Pride flickered in his eyes, a Targaryen trait not easily dismissed. When the last blow was struck and the bout was declared a narrow victory for the prince, the courtyard erupted in cautious applause. Lyanna offered a small smile, one so fleeting Bran wondered if Rhaegar noticed it at all. If he had, he did not react. He merely bowed to the knight, spoke polite words of thanks, and then turned away. Some watchers might have thought him cold or distant, but Bran knew the truth. He was trying to balance the weight of duty and the swirl of emotions that followed him wherever he went. Bran's own heart raced. He felt that swirling sense of time reconfiguring itself, shifting like the roots beneath the weirwood. This was but one seed he had planted, but already the future changed. There would be no public crowning of Lyanna before all the realm, no grand humiliation of Elia Martell. A tremor rolled through Bran's mind. He retreated from the scene, the courtyard and the swirling onlookers dissolving into pale light. He drew back to the heart tree, the pulsing redness of its carved face calling him home. His eyes flew open, and he found himself in the cold cavern beyond the wall, the roots of an ancient weirwood twisting around him like a cradle. The emptiness where the three-eyed raven had once perched loomed overhead, silent but never truly vacant. Bran's companions slumbered nearby or kept distant watch. No one spoke. The wind outside howled, and the sense of shifting echoes in the air told him something was different, that the tapestry of events beyond the wall had changed. Even the others, those dreaded White Walkers, felt more distant, as though some undercurrent of destiny had thinned the path they once trod into the realm of men. He allowed himself a single breath of hope before the exhaustion of the journey pulled him under. Sleep came in a slow wave, and with it, the silent question, "What have I done?" When Bran next opened his eyes, it was not in the cavern but in the dream once more. He stood amid a series of flickering images: Winterfell, King's Landing, the Red Mountains of Dorne, the Vale's rocky passes, the Riverland's green fields, and the forbidding walls of the Red Keep. His consciousness soared like a raven, glimpsing how each place responded to the reverberations of his small interference. Robert Baratheon was in the Vale, training with Jon Arryn, still the same bull-headed warrior, but with no direct cause to hate the Targaryens. Not yet. Eddard Stark, young and earnest, remained in the north, growing into his duties as the heir of Winterfell alongside his brother Brandon, who lived and laughed with a proud smile. Far in the south, the royal court circled King Aerys II Targaryen, who teetered on the edge of madness. Rhaegar was there too, returning from the north with perhaps a calmer heart, one that had not been inflamed by the stirring drama of a misread romance. It was all so precarious, but Bran felt the shape of it, a realm without the spark that ignited Robert's rebellion. Days passed in that dark cavern. Bran drifted between consciousness and dream, scrying the subtle changes. Sometimes, he awoke briefly to see Mira at his side, checking if he needed water or comfort. Other times, he found himself in the swirl of ancient visions, searching for the next node of time that needed his nudge. The tapestry of history was now in motion. He had to be careful. If he tried to twist too much at once, the result might be catastrophic. But his heart felt lighter. In some deep place, he believed there was a chance to save many lives. And if it worked, maybe the future would be free of the horrors he had witnessed. A new scene manifested in the Weirwood dream. This time, it was the Great Hall of the Red Keep in King's Landing. Great pillars rose toward a vaulted ceiling, and 1,000 torches burned to illuminate the finest tapestries the crown could display. On the Iron Throne sat King Aerys II, his once handsome face now ravaged by paranoia. Silken white hair clung to his temples, and his violet eyes bulged with perpetual suspicion. Court was in session. Lords from across the realm stood in attendance, with Rhaegar by the throne's side, regal in black and red. Bran's intangible vantage point drifted along the walls like a cool breeze, witnessing the tension that permeated the gathering. They were hearing petitions, concerns from various lords. But the real tension, Bran sensed, lay in the relationship between father and son. Aerys seldom let Rhaegar speak without interruption, and the kingdom could see the chasm widening between the old king and the crown prince. In the original timeline, that chasm had grown into an unbridgeable gulf once Rhaegar's personal life became a scandal. But here, the scandal never took root. Lyanna Stark was still in Winterfell, and though talk of her beauty and fierce heart might exist, it was overshadowed by the realm's other matters. The king's madness was the domain's pressing concern. Everyone wondered if Rhaegar would steer the realm better than his father. Now, with war not imminent, there was no immediate reason for the Targaryen line to be challenged by rebellion. Yet new threats lurked. Aerys had become suspicious of Tywin Lannister, once his most trusted hand. He distrusted half the realm, in fact. A swirl of rumors said the king saw traitors in every shadow, though none had yet raised arms against him. Without Robert's rebellion, the pot was not boiling over. But with Aerys's madness, it might begin simmering any day. Bran heard the half-muttered words of Pycelle, Varys, and other courtiers as they tried to navigate the tension. He saw the strain in Rhaegar's eyes. If the realm would be saved, Bran understood, it would not be enough to prevent the rebellion. He must also ensure stability under a Targaryen rule that was not overshadowed by Aerys's madness. Another wave of weariness coursed through Bran's mind. Could he really shape such a complicated future? The memory dissolved once more into swirling color. Bran felt himself drawn to a simpler place, Winterfell, his home as it had been years before his birth. The courtyard spread out before him again, though the season was gentler this time, the snows retreating. Ned Stark, young and solemn, spoke with his older brother Brandon by the training grounds. Brandon Stark was tall, broad-shouldered, with a brash laugh that Ned admired yet feared. Their sister Lyanna was watching from afar, perched on a stable fence. She smiled sometimes at her brother's banter. From the glimmer in her eye, Bran recognized the same fire that would later drive her to run away or be taken. Stories varied by Rhaegar, but in this altered stream of time, that flame had not found tinder in the Targaryen prince's gallantry. It flickered more softly, unlit by scandal. Bran drifted closer. Every time he observed, he risked shaping or reinforcing changes. But he was drawn by the need to see if everything was truly different. Brandon was engaged to Catelyn Tully, as the old stories recounted, but his wedding date had not yet come. Ned was an awkward youth, overshadowed by his older brother. Their father, Rhaegar Stark, was alive and well, presiding over Winterfell's matters with measured gravity. Bran felt a pang of emotion in his chest to see them all so whole and happy. The tragedies that had once claimed them. Brandon strangled at the command of the Mad King, Rhaegar burned alive, Ned forced to take up the mantle of head of House Stark. None of that had happened yet. In this reality, maybe it never would. A crow cawed overhead, and Bran's vision trembled, forcing him deeper into the swirl of events. He drifted through scenes of small decisions that spun out into bigger consequences. Brandon writing letters to Southern lords, forging alliances. Ned traveling to the Vale for a short time to see Jon Arryn but not staying for years. Robert Baratheon, still somewhat adrift without a rebellion to call him to arms, enjoying the pleasures of the Aerys hunts and feasts. At times, Bran would brush gently against the minds of certain lords or ladies, sowing hints of caution or urging a show of diplomacy when tensions flared. He felt like a gardener carefully tending fragile seedlings. Yet, behind it all, the great question loomed. What about the king, Aerys II Targaryen, who was sliding further into paranoia each passing year? Days and nights became a blur in Bran's waking life. In the darkness of the cavern, he nourished himself on whatever Mira and Hodder, back when Hodder was still Hodder in Bran's original timeline, he thought with a pang, might have provided had they been there. But now, as everything shifted, even the memory of Hodder seemed uncertain. The deeper he swam into the timelines, the more the lines between reality and vision twisted. He felt the living roots of the weirwoods supporting him, feeding him spiritual strength even as his body weakened. If he stayed too long in this liminal place, would he even be able to return? Still, the realm was changing. He saw glimpses that stirred hope. Rhaegar took more interest in governance, working behind the scenes to calm his father's madness, forging quiet friendships with key lords. The Starks remained strong in the north. The Tullys, the Arryns, the Baratheons, and the Lannisters all watched with interest, uncertain of how the political winds might shift. Word spread that the king might announce a grand council or a major celebration. None were sure which. Some whispered that Rhaegar might push for a more hands-on role, though he avoided outright confrontation with the king. And so that tension simmered, a possibility of some resolution that might keep the Targaryen line intact without bloodshed. Bran found himself turning his mind's eye back to the Tower of Joy, that haunted place where Ned Stark had once found his sister dying. He shuddered. In the original timeline, Lyanna's secret union with Rhaegar had led to Jon Snow's birth. Here, that secret union had never come to pass, and Bran wondered at the broader consequences. Jon Snow would not be born, and the prophecy of the prince that was promised might take a different shape. The White Walkers were still out there, lurking in the far north, and the realm would need a hero of some kind. Was that hero supposed to be Jon? Or was it Daenerys Targaryen, still a young girl in the current timeline, overshadowed by her father's mania? Everything weighed so heavily on him. In changing the path of Robert's rebellion, had he robbed the future of its champion against the greater enemy? Yet he saw no easy path to remedy that. He sensed that forging a different marriage for Rhaegar, or stoking a hidden romance, could risk reigniting the sparks that led to war. Another question haunted him. If the White Walkers were coming, would the realm be too complacent to unite against them without the forging fires of the rebellion and the wars that followed? Perhaps the very act of saving thousands of lives from rebellion was dooming them later. Bran tried to hold these conflicting threads in his mind, a near-impossible tapestry. He remembered the old warnings. One does not simply rewrite the past without incurring new fates. He pressed on regardless, believing that a realm at peace was more likely to rally under a strong leader when the time came. If that leader could be Rhaegar or Daenerys or perhaps someone else in the Targaryen line, then maybe the entire tragedy of the future could be avoided. Bran cast his consciousness southward, seeking that bright silver-haired girl, Daenerys, who at this time in history might be a babe in the cradle. In his original memories, she was eventually sold off to a Dothraki warlord. But here, everything might be different. Could she remain in King's Landing, raised with some measure of protection? The vision wavered, and he saw only glimpses of the child's caretaker in the Red Keep, an old septa with a pinched face, telling her stories of dragons and conquerors. Another wave of exhaustion hit Bran, and he lost the thread. In the cavern's darkness, his eyes flew open. He inhaled sharply, half lost between centuries. Mira wasn't there, no one was. The gloom felt heavier than before. He tried to move his legs, but of course he couldn't. That had been his life for so long now. He shifted his hands and felt the damp stone. This is the price of being the three-eyed raven, he told himself. His body was just a vessel. The real work was in the streams of time that twisted around the roots of the weirwoods. He let the exhaustion wash over him. Then he closed his eyes, and once more he sank into visions. He was in a small solar in the Red Keep. Rhaegar sat with several men around a table. Jon Connington, Arthur Dayne, and Oswell Went, all knights or lords close to him. They were speaking quietly about the king's deteriorating state, about the rumors that Aerys might soon order the execution of Tywin Lannister for imagined treasons. Bran's heart clenched. He could see the seeds of conflict forming. Even without Robert's rebellion, the realm might soon be plunged into a civil war pitting the crown prince against the Mad King. The men around Rhaegar exchanged worried glances, well aware that if Aerys acted on his impulses, the entire West might rise in fury. Jon Connington spoke first. "Your Highness, if the king sets a foot wrong with the Lannisters, Lord Tywin will not stand idle. He has the gold of Casterly Rock and half the realm's respect. We must do something." Rhaegar looked weary. "I have tried. My father listens to no one. Varys worms his way about, but not even he can quell these notions." Arthur Dayne, the sword of the morning, folded his arms. "Then we must brace for the worst. If the king orders a rash move, we may have to protect the realm from him." Silence fell. The loyalty these men felt for House Targaryen was iron-strong. Even that loyalty was tested by Aerys's madness. It occurred to Bran that this might have been the hidden spark for war if Robert's rebellion never began. Yet Rhaegar had a shred of patience, a sense of caution that might avert such a crisis. He exhaled slowly and spoke with a conviction that Bran hadn't heard before in these visions. "I cannot allow the realm to burn. Perhaps, if I gather loyal lords quietly, we can reason with him. If he's beyond reason, then we must remove him from the throne for the good of the Seven Kingdoms." No one argued. They all seemed to sense the inevitability. For the first time, Bran saw a path forming. A potential bloodless coup, or at least one orchestrated in such a way that the realm might remain mostly intact. If Rhaegar could depose Aerys without igniting a civil war, House Targaryen might stand united under a sane king. And if that happened, the war that had ravaged the future Bran knew might never come. The realm could rally under a stable Targaryen monarchy. Lives would be spared in the north, in Dorne, in the Stormlands, everywhere. And with the realm intact, maybe they would be better prepared for the long night. Bran felt hope again, even though he knew how fragile this was, how quickly tensions could escalate. It was more than he had ever dared dream. He let the vision fade, carried on a swirl of leaves, drifting back to the emptiness of the cavern. The toll of shaping these events weighed on his chest like a millstone, but he held fast to the knowledge that he was preserving the future in a way no one else could. Time in the vision realm moved unpredictably. One moment, Bran's mind was calm. The next, it blazed with new scenes. He glimpsed a meeting of lords loyal to Rhaegar, gathered quietly in the Red Keep's lower halls. He saw ravens flying across the realm, carrying coded messages to the Tullys, the Arryns, the Starks, the Baratheons, even the Martells. A sense of cautious unity began to form. The possibility of avoiding complete chaos seemed stronger than ever. Aerys, though suspicious, had not yet discovered the depth of Rhaegar's planning. He lived in a world of illusions, trusting that fear alone would keep any traitors at bay. Yet fear was exactly the weapon Rhaegar now recognized as a brittle sword. So the prince pressed ahead, forging secret bonds with men who wanted to see the realm thrive again. Some might have dreamed of rebellion in a darker timeline, but now they found a way forward that did not require mass slaughter. Still, all of them knew that if Aerys learned even a piece of this conspiracy, heads would roll. Bran, watching from a place outside of time, shuddered at the tension. This was a new battlefield, a war of secrets and whispered alliances, carried out in hush rather than in pitched conflict. If it succeeded, the realm would pivot on a knife's edge toward peace. If it failed, blood would likely flow just as freely as in any rebellion. On a crisp afternoon, Rhaegar summoned a gathering in a small courtyard behind Maegor's holdfast, far from the usual eyes and ears. Among those present were Arthur Dayne, Jon Connington, and a handful of other trusted allies. Bran hovered, invisible, as Rhaegar addressed them. The prince's voice was steady. "The time for half measures is ending. I have asked the High Septon to legitimize a gathering of lords to address the king's condition. He will arrive in a fortnight. By then, I want every major lord in King's Landing, sworn to keep the peace." We will confront my father, offering him a chance to step aside gracefully. If he refuses, then we do what must be done." Bran felt a tremor of both dread and exhilaration. Rhaegar was stepping forward, no longer content to watch as Aerys spiraled. In the original timeline, none of this happened because war erupted too quickly. Aerys' paranoia, the abduction of Lyanna, the brutal executions of Rhaegar and Brandon Stark. These lit the fuse that led to Robert's rebellion. Now that fuse had been soaked. Rhaegar was forging a different path. Weeks passed in a blur of images. Bran saw lords arriving in King's Landing under the guise of a great festival. The Tullus came, with Lord Hoster Tully at their head. The Arryns were represented by the elderly Jon Arryn. Robert Baratheon, broad-shouldered and jovial, was with him, curiosity and a faint sense of confusion in his eyes. From the north, Lord Rhaegar Stark arrived with his sons, Brandon and Ned. Lyanna was not present. There was no betrothal to Robert in this timeline, no cause for her to travel. The Lannisters loomed on the horizon, Tywin's retinue bright in crimson and gold. Even the Martells sent a delegation, though Prince Doran himself did not come. Instead, he sent Prince Oberyn, whose eyes burned with cunning. A few Tyrell bannermen also drifted in, along with minor lords from across the realm. King's Landing buzzed with rumors of something grand, though no one publicly spoke of a council to depose the king. Bran's vantage point drifted through corridors, halls, and private chambers. He saw anxious whispers. He caught glimpses of Robert Baratheon's confusion. "Why gather all these lords just for feasting?" the Storm Lord asked, half to Jon Arryn, half to his other companions. "This city stinks of secrets." Bran watched Ned Stark linger by the windows of a tower, eyeing the Red Keep's labyrinth of stone with quiet caution. Brandon Stark seemed more at ease, a jovial presence who teased younger knights and boasted about the North's grandeur. Yet beneath that laughter, he was watchful. Rhaegar Stark kept a solemn face, having heard rumors that the realm was about to shift. The puzzle pieces all lay on the board, waiting for the final stroke to decide the game's outcome. The day arrived for the secret council. Bran saw the lords gathered in the Red Keep's throne room, though King Aerys was absent. He was secured in his chambers, heavily guarded, unaware of the scheme unfolding. Rhaegar stood at the foot of the Iron Throne, facing the assembled ranks of nobility. Tension crackled in the air. Some lords cast wary glances toward the doors, half expecting gold cloaks loyal to the king to burst in at any moment. But Rhaegar's preparations had been thorough. His loyal Kingsguard, Arthur Dayne and Oswell, went among them, stood discreetly at the margins, ensuring no harm would come to the council. Rhaegar spoke, his voice poised. "My lords, I have called you here to avert a disaster. We know the king, my father, has fallen ever deeper into paranoia. Perhaps some of you have been its victims. Many fear that at any moment he could lash out. I have reason to believe he plans to strike at Lord Tywin Lannister and others besides." A rumble passed through the hall. Tywin's face remained impassive, carved in stone. Robert Baratheon muttered something under his breath but did not speak. Rhaegar Stark gave a slight nod of acknowledgement. Bran, observing, sensed hearts pounding. This was the moment. If the lords refused to join Rhaegar, or if they turned on one another, the city could erupt in chaos. Rhaegar continued, "I beseech you, as men sworn to protect the realm, to support a bloodless transition. Let my father step down and retire under honorable guard. Let me take the throne to ensure the realm's peace and prosperity. In exchange, I offer my vow to preserve your rights, your lands, your dignity, and the stability of these 7 kingdoms." Silence clung for a moment. Then Robert Baratheon stepped forward. Bran tensed, recalling how, in another timeline, Robert would have been the Targaryen line's bitter foe. But here he was untested by heartbreak and betrayal. His voice boomed across the hall, "And if the king refuses?" Rhaegar's expression flickered with pain. "I will do everything in my power to avoid bloodshed, but I will not let the realm burn." The hush thickened. Bran willed them to unite, to see reason. At last, Tywin Lannister inclined his head. "Your Highness, you have my support," he said, his voice calm. "The realm cannot afford King Aerys's madness any longer." That was the first crack in the dam. Others followed, more lords expressing their reluctant agreement. Some offered conditions or asked for new privileges or offices, but the sentiment was clear. They were ready to back Rhaegar if it meant saving the realm from Aerys's tyranny. Robert Baratheon grunted, crossing his arms. "I want no part in Targaryen squabbles," he barked, though he did not entirely reject the plan. "But if the realm is threatened, I'll do my duty." It was as close to agreement as one could expect from him. Rhaegar Stark, quietly, stated that the North supported the prince, so long as northern autonomy was respected. With that, the path was set. The next day, a delegation led by Rhaegar and Arthur Dayne approached the royal chambers. Aerys was in a foul mood even before they arrived, and when they did, his rage flared. The king, unkempt hair frizzing around his head, shrieked accusations of treason. Guards loyal to him wavered under the calm but insistent presence of Prince Rhaegar and the heraldic display of half the realm's greatest lords at his back. It took tense minutes before the old king realized that no one would obey his frantic calls to arrest Rhaegar. Panic seized him. He threatened to burn them all, to unleash wildfire, to feed them to the flames. Rhaegar knelt, speaking softly, calling his father to reason. But Aerys only screamed louder, cursing them all. Bran, watching through the weirwood's power, felt the ghostly echo of the king's mania. It was like a wind that threatened to blow the entire future into chaos. Eventually, Arthur Dayne and other loyal Kingsguard stepped forward. Gently but firmly, they disarmed Aerys of the dagger he'd been clutching. The king let out one final, piercing shriek. Then he deflated like a rag set down. His eyes darted about, crazed. Rhaegar stood and beckoned men forward. "My father is unwell," he said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "I shall see that he receives proper care in the Red Keep." No one contested it. They ushered Aerys away under guard, leaving Rhaegar behind, trembling with the weight of what had just been done. 2 days later, the prince was crowned King Rhaegar I Targaryen in a subdued ceremony in the Great September of Baelor. The lords who had gathered bore witness. Tywin Lannister observed with measured calm, Robert Baratheon with a restless energy, Rhaegar Stark with silent acceptance. There was no riot, no bloodshed in the streets. There were, of course, hushes of discontent, but the fear of Aerys's madness overshadowed them. To most, it seemed a relief that the realm might see a stable reign once more. And so, without the spark of a rebellion, the Targaryen dynasty continued, changed, yes, but still on the Iron Throne. Bran watched from afar, a silent participant in the crowning. In his heart, he felt a flicker of triumph and dread all at once. He had changed the past. He had prevented Robert's rebellion. Yet as the future unspooled before him, he wondered what other storms might gather. The White Walkers still lurked in the north. The prophecy of the prince that was promised hovered unanswered. And though Rhaegar was wise and gentle, the realm had not truly been tested by the fires of war. Would that unity hold when the cold winds rose? He could only watch. For the moment, the realm celebrated cautiously. King Rhaegar took on the duties of rulership with measured grace, supported by a council of lords who had risked treason to elevate him. Queen Elia Martell remained at his side, proud and serene. Their children, Rhaenys and Aegon, toddled around the Red Keep under the watchful eyes of their caretakers. Rumors spread that the new king might one day push for fresh alliances through marriages, possibly even bridging old rifts with houses Stark or Baratheon. For now, the realm breathed a sigh of tentative relief. In Winterfell, Rhaegar Stark hosted quiet feasts in honor of the new king. Brandon Stark laughed with the castle's men, certain that the North had been spared a dreadful fate. Ned Stark thought about the future, gazing northward from the battlements, wondering what shape the realm would take under the new monarch. Lyanna Stark, for her part, indulged in her riding and her hunts, free from the tragic destiny that had once awaited her. She was betrothed to no one yet, and she seemed as wild and untamed as the winter snows. If she felt any longing for Rhaegar, if her heart had been stirred even faintly by their brief encounter, it was but a distant echo, overshadowed by the swirl of life at Winterfell. Far in the southwestern deserts of Dorne, Oberyn Martell raised toasts to his sister's continued health. In the Eyrie, Jon Arryn counseled the young Robert Baratheon to bide his time, to trust in a realm that might yet hold wonders for them. At Casterly Rock, Tywin Lannister weighed his old grudges and new opportunities, ever mindful of the power he wielded. The Tyrells, the Greyjoys, the Tullys all watched the horizon with cautious optimism. And in King's Landing, under the watchful eyes of the new King Rhaegar, the corridors were alive with intrigue but, for once, not drowned in fear. Bran hovered in the weirwood dream, relieved by the relative peace. He had done it. He had prevented Robert's rebellion. But he also knew the game was far from over. The next challenge awaited, a challenge that the realm had never faced in the original timeline until it was almost too late. The White Walkers and the Long Night. Would Rhaegar's 7 kingdoms stand against the ancient darkness? And what of Daenerys, the dragon's daughter who, in Bran's memory, had once hatched living dragons and walked through fire? Now she was a child growing up under her brother's reign, in a realm that might never see her exiled. Would the dragons ever return? Bran recognized that he had more work ahead. Keeping Robert's rebellion from ever happening was but the first step. He had shifted one piece on the board, but the deeper game raged on. As he prepared to slip further into visions, he prayed silently that the 7 kingdoms would be strong enough when the time came. For all the hearts he had spared from heartbreak, for all the lives he had saved from the horrors of war, Bran knew that the greatest war, one that transcended mortal ambitions, was still to come. He closed his eyes, feeling the weirwood roots cradle him. The future, now unwritten, unfurled in his mind. He would watch, he would guide where he could, and he would hope that, in this second chance he had granted the realm, the living could stand united when winter finally fell. Yet even as darkness claimed his weary mind, a small voice whispered, "The price of change can be high. The realm is fragile, and men's hearts unpredictable. Peace born of conspiracies and forced transitions might not hold under real pressure." Still, he clung to hope. Perhaps preventing Robert's rebellion was enough to give them a fighting chance. And in the deep hush of the cavern, Bran Stark, the boy who fell from a tower, soared in dreams beyond imagining, guiding a realm's fate, determined not to let it shatter again. He dreamed of the snow falling across the north, of the free folk beyond the wall stirring, of a darkness with blue eyes gliding through the ancient forests. And he saw flickers of a flame, dragonfire, perhaps, burning in the distance, a promise that in this timeline of changed fates, dragons and wolves together might stand against the storm to come. If the realm would only heed the warnings, if the realm would only unite under Rhaegar's calm rule, if the living would only believe. And so Bran dreamed, forging step by step a new song for the 7 kingdoms, one that did not begin with the hammer of Robert Baratheon, but perhaps might end with a united realm standing together against the true enemy. And for the first time in a long time, the faintest edge of a smile curled Bran's lips as he slipped deeper into the visions. He had succeeded in changing the past. Now he could only guide the future. In King's Landing, King Rhaegar's eyes opened at dawn to a new day, unaware of the boy in the far north who had nudged Time's river, and who watched over him like a guardian ghost from the weirwood's crimson eyes. Rhaegar stepped onto the balcony to see the rising sun paint the city golden. This was the realm he had saved from his father's madness. Quietly, he prayed for wisdom and strength, not knowing how heavily the fate of the living rested upon his shoulders. Unbeknownst to him, in the swirling depths of a cave far beyond the wall, Bran Stark's dreams carried the echoes of a different war, one that would overshadow all the wars of men. But for now, there was peace in the 7 kingdoms, a fragile bloom, but a bloom nonetheless. It was more than Bran had ever hoped to see, and he cherished it, if only for a moment, in the shifting seas of time. Even then, beyond the shivering sea, winds began to stir. In the east, powers moved. In the far north, eyes of ice glowed faintly. But within the heart of the land, for once, men were not locked in battle against each other. That might be enough. it had to be enough. And if it was not, Bran would find a way. He had come too far to let the realm fall. Thus, in the tapestry of fate, a new thread glimmered, woven by the hands of a boy who had seen too much. The realm breathed, balanced on the cusp of what was and what might yet be. For all their flaws, for all their old grudges, the lords of Westeros found themselves unbloodied by rebellion, standing at the dawn of a new era. Whether that era would blossom into harmony or descend into ruin was a question only time could answer. But time, at least, was on their side now, and Bran Stark would do everything in his power to ensure it remained so. That, he promised, before drifting into the calm, endless dark. He had started a new story. It was up to them, Rhaegar, the lords, the people of Westeros, to see it through, and perhaps, just perhaps, the realm was at last in good hands. King Rhaegar rose before first light in the Red Keep, slipping from a restless sleep into the hush of pre-dawn. He dressed without the usual attendants, choosing to knot the fastenings of his doublet with fingers that still bore faint calluses from his harp strings. A gray cloak fell around his shoulders. The garments were finely wrought, of course. He was the king now, but they lacked the ostentation of courtly splendor. He did not need rubies or roaring dragons on every stitch to remind him of his duty. He made his way across the cool marble floors of Rhaegar's holdfast, out into the courtyard. The air was fresh with the tang of the Blackwater Bay, carrying a hint of brine. He could almost pretend he was still just Prince Rhaegar, stolen from dawn to practice the lute in a solitary corridor. But that life was gone. It was the 3rd month of his reign. Sometimes he woke and found it hard to believe they had deposed his father without carnage. No torches set King's Landing aflame. No armies had descended on the capital, swords drawn. Instead, lords of every corner of the realm had quietly come together, united by the fear that Aerys II Targaryen would soon burn them all. The old king had been ushered away, howling, to a guarded suite in the Red Keep. Such an act was treason under any other king, and Rhaegar bore the knowledge like a chain of iron links around his heart. He could not even find relief in the outcome, for a throne was heavier than any man realized, heavier still under the weight of a father's curses echoing off the cold stone walls of a tower. He passed a pair of gold cloaks standing at attention near the courtyard gate. They bowed low. "Your Grace," one murmured. Rhaegar inclined his head in acknowledgement but said nothing. A hush enveloped the courtyard, broken only by the flutter of banners from the ramparts. The sun was still hidden below the horizon, painting the sky a deep indigo streaked with pale ribbons of light. He crossed to the training yard, where a solitary figure was already at practice. Ser Jaime Lannister, newly appointed to the Kingsguard after Ser Gerald Hightower's decision to retire, was whirling through sword forms. A torch set in a bracket against the wall offered flickering illumination. Jaime's golden hair glinted each time he pivoted, the steel of his long sword hissing in arcs of deadly grace. He was a youth still, but the promise of the swordsman he would become burned in every movement. He halted at the sound of Rhaegar's approach and dipped his head. "Your Grace." Rhaegar lifted a hand. "Carry on." He had wanted a moment of quiet reflection here, in the heart of the Red Keep, to remind himself that the realm was more than a tapestry of alliances. It was real men and women, like this knight so young, sworn to defend him. Jaime stood at ease, sword tip resting on the ground. "It's too early for spectators, Your Grace. Even the master-at-arms is Abed." "So it is," Rhaegar replied softly. "But sometimes sleep is elusive." He regarded Jaime, recalling how quickly the youth had grown from a page at Casterly Rock to a knight in King's Landing. In another time, when war ravaged the kingdoms, Jaime Lannister's story might have twisted in darker ways. Here, though, with no rebellion, Jaime had simply risen as a prodigy. Tywin Lannister still commanded respect throughout the realm, but Rhaegar felt no immediate threat from the Lion. They were uneasy allies. Nothing more, nothing less. "Shall I fetch Ser Arthur Dayne, if Your Grace wishes to spar?" Jaime asked, half hopeful. Rhaegar knew Arthur had taken Jaime under his wing, recognizing a spark of potential. And perhaps, too, The famed sword of the morning saw in Jaime the restlessness of youth that needed a careful hand to guide it. Rhaegar shook his head. Not today. I came here only to think. Please resume your drills, Sir Jaime. You're doing well. Jaime did so, trying not to look too pleased by the king's remark. Rhaegar stood with arms folded, watching the crisp sword forms. His thoughts turned inward. This courtyard had once been a place for public displays of prowess, tournaments, bold challenges, but that had been in more peaceful times, when his father was younger and not yet fully consumed by madness. Now it felt like a stage set for uncertain days. King's Landing was calm, but the undercurrents of fear, ambition, and lingering mistrust ran deep. The realm had never experienced a swift, quiet deposition of a monarch before. There were no established laws for how to treat a living, deposed king. Lords who had pledged themselves to Rhaegar's cause still waited to see if his rule would bring them advantage or if some piece of the old king's vengeance might surface. Some days, Rhaegar wondered if it might have been simpler had war decided the matter. But that was not the path he'd chosen. Bloodless or not, the throne was his. He meant to keep the realm at peace, and that meant navigating a labyrinth of rivalries. Dawn's light crept over the high walls, and Rhaegar took a final breath of the cool air. He had petitions to hear in the throne room soon and letters to draft. For a moment, he missed his harp, missed singing softly while the world slept. Duty first, he reminded himself, then he turned back inside with steady resolve. He heard the city stirring beyond the castle gates as he walked the echoing corridors. Bakers lighting their ovens, fishermen dragging in the night's catch, the hum of 1,000 small lives unfolding. There was something grand and terrifying about it. He was king of them all now, and somewhere, behind guarded doors, Aerys II Targaryen cursed him, calling him usurper, traitor, kinslayer in spirit if not in deed. Each morning, Rhaegar braced for the day when he would be forced to confront his father face to face, forced to hear the ravings from the lips of the man who had once held him as a babe. But not yet. As he passed from Maegor's holdfast into the main keep, guards opened a door to reveal the presence of Pycelle, waiting with a bow. "Your Grace," the old man said with a polite stoop, "I have the day's papers, courtesy of the Ravens. The small council is convened and awaits you." Rhaegar steeled himself for the tedium of governance. "Very well, I'll join them. Is Lord Connington back from Maidenpool?" Pycelle, blinking, consulted a roll of parchment. "He arrived in the black of night, Your Grace. He has news to share. Something about shipments from Essos and certain smugglers, I believe." Rhaegar nodded, continuing along. Varys would doubtless have more to say on that. The realm might be at peace for now, but unscrupulous merchants had begun taking advantage of the quiet to slip in contraband. Managing those who smelled profit in uncertain times was yet another challenge. Beyond the triple doors of the council chamber, Rhaegar entered to find the lords and ministers rising at his approach. Lord Tywin Lannister, regal and forbidding in pale velvet, nodded curtly. Varys, the spider, offered a soft smile from within his voluminous robes. Lord Jon Connington, his coppery hair touched with dust from travel, set aside a cup of watered wine and bowed. Ser Gerald Hightower, although retired from the Kingsguard, was acting in an advisory role, and Arthur Dayne often joined these sessions at Rhaegar's invitation. Oberyn Martell, visiting from Dorne for the season, leaned casually against a pillar with a sardonic smile on his lips. A handful of other faces were present too, though some seats were empty. The realm was vast, and not every lord could remain in King's Landing indefinitely. Rhaegar took his seat at the head of the long table. "Let us begin," he said, smoothing the wrinkles in his cloak. His gaze flicked around, measuring each man's bearing. He reminded himself that they were not mere courtiers. They had risked their lives and their families' fates by supporting him against the Mad King. Jon Connington spoke first, resting his palms on the table. "Your Grace, I bring word from Maidenpool and the surrounding coastline. Smugglers are plying the waters in greater numbers than we've seen in years. It may be that the lull in conflict has made them bold, or else they sense that our navy is not well maintained. My men seized 2 vessels carrying stolen spices from the Jade Sea. Another was rumored to bear dragonbone contraband, though we haven't confirmed it yet. Rhaegar weighed the matter. We need to ensure stability along the coasts. If these smugglers grow bolder, we risk pirates flocking to our shores. Contact Lord Stannis Baratheon at Dragonstone. He has a mind for naval matters, or so I'm told. Perhaps we can establish a royal patrol along key points. This realm must see that we uphold the king's peace. Tywin's gaze was cool. Lord Stannis is a younger brother to Lord Robert, who has hardly been eager to show fealty to the crown. Are we certain it is wise to grant him such power? Rhaegar met Tywin's stare. Wise or not, the Baratheons share Targaryen blood from generations back. They are storm lords, not traitors. Robert's frustrations stem from boredom, not disloyalty. Let us give him and his brother a chance to prove their worth in service to the crown. A man who is idle will always find trouble, but a man with purpose may become an ally. There was a faint flicker in Tywin's green eyes, but he nodded, deferring to the king's judgment. In a different reality, one that Bran Stark had nudged off its course, Tywin might have taken the field to break King's Landing wide open if Rhaegar and Aerys had refused to yield. Instead, here he was stoic but loyal to the new order. Varys cleared his throat next, leaning forward with an ingratiating smile. Your Grace, there are whispers from Pentos and Lys regarding certain exiled magisters who resent their banishments. One rumor speaks of attempts to purchase unsavory knowledge, spells, or something else entirely. My little birds remain uncertain, but it is worth vigilance. I mention it only to remind your Grace that our enemies might not solely reside within Westeros. Peace can sometimes breed complacency. Rhaegar tapped his fingers lightly on the table. I appreciate the warning. Keep me informed. We must ensure the 7 kingdoms do not become the plaything of foreign powers. The session continued for some time, touching on the usual array of taxes, trade routes, and the great rains we might expect in the next season. Each small decision shaped the realm's quiet future. At length, servants appeared, bearing a light meal, and the men adjourned their discussions for the moment. After the others drifted away, Rhaegar lingered with Lord John Connington and Ser Arthur Dayne. Connington, as Hand of the King, had a weary cast to his features these days. He was the one who ended up overseeing half the projects Rhaegar initiated. Arthur Dayne had his own calm aura, as though he walked with the surety of one who had faced down every challenge and emerged unbroken. It gave Rhaegar solace to have them near. When the chamber was empty but for them, Connington exhaled. I could use a cask of wine after that. You know we walk a razor's edge, your Grace. Old loyalties to your father run deep in some corners, even if that loyalty was fear more than love. And other men, like Tywin, might see a chance to take advantage if your rule ever falters. Arthur said quietly, with respect, Tywin Lannister is many things, but a fool is not one of them. He knows if he tries to carve out an independent path, the realm would close ranks against him. House Lannister cannot risk it. Rhaegar nodded. He is cunning, though, and that can be dangerous in its own way. But so long as our goals are aligned, I welcome his service. He paused, glancing at Arthur. Is there any further trouble in the Kingsguard? Some still feel loyalty to my father. Arthur pressed his lips together. Barristan Selmy and I have tried to maintain discipline. The men respect you, but King Aerys was their sworn liege. A few, particularly Ser Mandon Moore, still grapple with the notion that they guard the father in his captivity even while they serve the son on the throne. We do our best to ease tensions. Rhaegar massaged his temple. I know, and I'm grateful. Should you see any sign that conflict may erupt, come to me immediately. We will, Arthur said. Then he bowed. If you'll excuse me, I'll see that the men at arms are organized for the morning watch. The city stirs fully by now. Rhaegar watched him go. Then he turned to Connington. I suppose we should talk of matters at Storm's End. Have you had word from Robert or Stannis since you returned? Connington ran a hand through his copper hair. A raven arrived at dawn. Robert invites you to a feast marking the anniversary of the Storm King's victory over House Durrandon centuries ago. Something about upholding old traditions. Could be a chance to mend fences. He's restless, as you know. The realm's quiet does not suit him. I suspect he wants your attention, and perhaps a reason to test his prowess in a tourney. Rhaegar's eyes softened with something akin to amusement. He always did love the crash of steel and the roar of the crowd. Very well. I'll consider traveling there once the immediate demands in King's Landing are settled. Our presence in the Stormlands might reassure the lords that we value their strength. Connington hesitated. I'll send a raven to confirm. But I also wonder if you might see to forging a marriage alliance, Your Grace. Not for yourself, but for your children or siblings. We stand at a pivotal moment. Strengthening ties with major houses is never a poor choice. Rhaegar tensed slightly. Once, the pursuit of marriage alliances had led him into scandal. But that was in a different timeline, one where his fascination with Lyanna Stark had ignited the realm. Now he and Elia stood together, scarred by the memory of how precarious the realm could be, yet determined to chart a peaceful path. He needed no new wife, but Aegon and Rhaenys were only children, and Daenerys, his baby sister, was barely toddling, though she was quick to delight at every swirl of color and curious shape in the Red Keep. Alliances might still be years off. He said quietly, "We will see. For now, let the children grow. I have no wish to throw them into courtly intrigues." Connington gave a soft huff of a laugh. A fair stance, though some might say we should secure alliances while the realm is stable. If that changes, it might be too late. Rhaegar nodded. If that changes, we'll adapt. Until then, let us not treat them like pawns on a board. He rose from his chair. I'll speak with Lord Tywin about resources for the Navy. And you, my friend, should rest. You've traveled too far and come back with a cartload of troubles. We'll deal with them in time. Connington bowed low. As you will, Your Grace. They parted ways. Rhaegar took a winding route toward his private solar, weaving through galleries where the sun now poured in from high windows. The day's business was only beginning, and already a subtle fatigue pressed at his eyes. Yet he forced himself to remain focused. Too many men relied on him to keep the realm's delicate peace. He would not fail them. Near the corridor that led to his solar, a young page hurried forth. Your Grace, pardon, Your Grace. The Queen has asked for your presence. The lad bowed so awkwardly that Rhaegar almost smiled. He dismissed the page with a nod. Elia wanted him. That tugged more strongly at him than any council matter. Duty might pull him in every direction, but love, for Elia, for their children, was the anchor he needed. He found Elia in a small courtyard garden, carefully tended to provide her some semblance of the warmer climes of Dorne. An orange tree stood at one corner, though it rarely produced fruit in King's Landing's less forgiving weather. Vines of pale flowers climbed a trellis, weaving fresh fragrance into the air. Elia sat on a wooden bench with a shawl draped over her shoulders. Her dark eyes were turned upward, watching Rhaenys chase a butterfly around the short grass. Little Aegon, still unsteady on his feet, waddled after his sister. A pair of guards lingered discreetly at the edges, and a maid hovered by, ready to scoop Aegon up if he ventured too close to the steps. Elia looked up at Rhaegar's approach and smiled, though a shadow of worry lay behind her eyes. "My love," she said softly, extending a hand. He took it and sat beside her on the bench. Her cheeks were thinner than they had been years ago. Her health had never been robust, but there was a resilience about her that heartened him. "You wish to see me?" he asked. She nodded toward the children. "They wish to see you, mostly. Rhaenys has been asking why you must hold court and sign papers all day, instead of playing in the sun. I told her your duties are important, but she is determined to show you the pretty beetle she found in the bushes." Rhaegar let out a gentle laugh. "A beetle? How can I refuse so crucial a matter?" He called his daughter's name, and she spun around with a bright grin, hurrying to him with her hem rucking up around her ankles. In her palm was a tiny green beetle, half-curled. Rhaenys declared it the loveliest beetle in the realm. Aegon gurgled, trying to see what the fuss was about, and promptly sat down with a thump. Rhaegar coaxed them both onto his lap, mindful not to crush the hapless creature. He offered them a few moments of undivided attention, listening to their childish delight. Elia watched, her expression warming. It was in these fleeting instants that Rhaegar felt the true weight of his responsibilities. He was not simply a king. He was a father and a husband. If he failed, it would not be only the realm that suffered. When Aegon finally wiggled free and toddled off to chase Rhaenys again, Elia put her hand on Rhaegar's arm. "You're tired," she murmured. "I see it in your eyes every morning. Are the burdens truly so heavy so soon?" He drew in a breath. "It was never going to be simple, but I believe we are holding the realm together. I only worry what might happen if my father's madness grows worse, or if Robert Baratheon finds cause to rebel, or if Tywin grows impatient. We have halted open war, but have we truly sown the seeds for lasting peace? Some days I'm certain we have. Others, I'm less sure." Elia's grip tightened gently. "You are not alone, Rhaegar. We all stand with you. Dorne stands with you. The loyal men of the Crownlands stand with you. I've heard that even in the north, Lord Ricard speaks favorably of your calm approach. That must be a first for a Targaryen in generations. House Stark has no reason to plot otherwise." He smiled at the mention of the Starks. In that other future he had glimpsed in half-remembered prophecy, though he would never speak of it openly. Lyanna Stark's name had meant heartbreak and war. Now she remained safe in Winterfell, unbound by the tragedies that once would have taken her life. Perhaps the gods had granted them all a second chance. "I still think about the North," he confessed quietly. "If the White Walkers of legend were to stir—" He broke off, uncertain how much he should say. The prophecy of the prince that was promised lingered in his mind. Once, he had believed that child would come from his bloodline, that he himself might be the instrument of prophecy, or that his heirs would be. Even if the name Azor Ahai was hardly spoken among the faith of the Seven, Rhaegar believed there was truth in the old mystic warnings. "Never mind," he murmured. "Might have beens and old fears are no help if they cloud our judgment." Elia's gaze flickered with curiosity. She knew him well enough to sense he was holding back. But she did not press. "Should we travel north one day, we can ask Lord Ricard if winter truly does last forever there," she said, trying for a lighter note. Rhaegar only nodded, leaning over to brush a kiss to her temple. "You look weary. How are you feeling?" "Truly?" A faint smile curved her lips. "Better. The maester's draughts help, though they taste of chalk. My cough is not as persistent as it was." She laid a hand on her belly, where she had once carried each of their 2 children through difficult pregnancies. The memory of her frailty during childbirth still haunted him. Perhaps if war had erupted, she might have died in the chaos that consumed the capital. Yet they had been spared that. "Don't fret over me," Elia said gently. "I am strong enough to handle a little weakness now and again. Worry more for your father, locked away in that tower." Rhaegar sighed. "He refuses every offer of comfort, every attempt at reason. Grand Maester Pycelle says there may be tonics to calm his mind, but you know how father is about alchemists and potions. He sees conspiracies in every shadow." "He always did," Elia said. "He threatened to burn us all once, if you recall." "I recall too well." Rhaegar brushed a stray hair from Elia's face. "I sometimes wonder if, no, even thinking it is unworthy." She read the flicker of guilt in his face. "You wonder if it would have been better for him to die, rather than live in this half-mad torment." He nodded slowly, shame warming his cheeks. "He was once a father I admired, in my earliest childhood. There are times I question whether this is truly kinder." Elia leaned against him. "We do the best we can. Holding him might be an act of mercy. Perhaps he will find some glimmer of peace yet. At the least, you have spared the realm from further horror." He listened to the children's laughter in the background, felt Elia's breath against his shoulder, and recalled the darkest rumors of his father's final days in that other timeline. The wildfire caches hidden beneath King's Landing, the vow to burn them all, the unstoppable wrath that cost so many lives. If he had done nothing else right, at least he had prevented that. He closed his eyes, letting himself find solace in the quiet garden for a few moments more. Soon, the day's demands dragged him back to the corridors and the swirl of courtiers. Yet, in the corner of his mind, he held onto Elia's warmth and the children's laughter like a secret talisman. He would not fail them. Word that the king might visit Storm's End spread quickly, carried on the wings of ravens. Days later, Rhaegar received a curt, if enthusiastic, reply from Robert Baratheon. The Storm Lord would welcome him with open arms, with feasting, hawking, and a grand melee. Rhaegar's council recognized the strategic value of forging a warmer bond with the Baratheons. And so, not a fortnight later, the royal retinue set out. Elia remained behind, her health not yet robust enough for such a journey, and the children stayed with her. Rhaegar's party included Arthur Dayne, Jaime Lannister, Jon Connington, and a score of household knights, along with a sprinkling of courtiers who insisted upon traveling in the king's presence. The roads toward the Stormlands were in decent repair. After all, there had been no rebellion to tear them up. As they passed through villages, common folk came out to gape at the king. Some cheered. Others simply stood, silent and wary. They had known only Aerys's rule, which was fearsome. This new Targaryen king was an untested figure to them. Rhaegar smiled when he could, but he was always aware of how brittle the realm's trust might be. Storm's End rose out of the coastline like a colossal sentinel. The thick walls braced against the savage winds of Shipbreaker Bay. Seagulls wheeled overhead, their cries mingling with the crash of waves. Rhaegar drew his hood tighter as the wind whipped across the drawbridge. A cluster of knights in Baratheon colors awaited him in the courtyard, with banners of the stag snapping overhead. And at their head stood Robert Baratheon himself, a giant of a man, dark-haired and barrel-chested, with a booming laugh that seemed to echo off the high stone walls. "Your Grace," Robert called, stepping forward to clasp Rhaegar's arm once the king dismounted. "Seven hells, it's good to see you anywhere but that stuffy Red Keep. You look well, Targaryen, far too pale, though. We'll put some color in those cheeks soon enough." Rhaegar allowed a faint smile. "Robert," he greeted, noticing how Robert's eyes glowed with excitement, as though a friendly contest of arms was worth 1,000 sessions of council. "Thank you for the invitation. Your keep is as impressive as the songs say." Robert's mouth twisted in amusement. "Aye, she's a grand old fortress, tough as iron and nearly as unyielding. Come, we'll get you settled. Then we'll feast until we can't stand. I've a mind for a small melee tomorrow, if you're inclined." Rhaegar glanced at his knights. "I'm sure Ser Arthur would be pleased to test his blade against your men." Arthur Dayne bowed politely. Robert barked a laugh. "Aye, the sword of the morning. I'll pit him against my best. If any such man even exists." He gestured behind him, where Stannis Baratheon stood, gloomily surveying the new arrivals. "Here's my brother. I'd wager he's the better commander of the two of us, though I'll not say it to his face. Don't want him getting a big head." Stannis gave a stiff bow, jaw clenched. "Your Grace. Welcome." Rhaegar returned the gesture. "Well met, Lord Stannis. I understand you've a mind for ships. We should speak soon about new patrols for the royal fleet." A flash of something, surprise, maybe satisfaction, crossed Stannis's features. "I serve at your Grace's pleasure," he said flatly. Robert ushered them all inside, leading Rhaegar through the fortress's winding corridors. Tapestries depicting the Storm Kings of old adorned the walls, showing fierce stags locked in battle with griffins, dragons, and even giant serpents. Braziers cast a warm glow against the cold stone. Servants bustled about, preparing for the evening's feast. The entire castle thrummed with life. That night, the great hall of Storm's End filled with the clamor of cups and the scent of roasted boar. Musicians played lively tunes that were more robust than the refined songs of King's Landing. Robert, enthroned at the dais beside Rhaegar, clapped along with the beat, draining cup after cup of strong ale. Between mouthfuls of food, he boasted about the hunts he'd led in the Rainwood, the boars he'd slain, the stags he'd wrestled. His voice thundered with irrepressible mirth. Rhaegar sipped wine and listened politely, occasionally exchanging glances with Jon Connington, who looked faintly exasperated at Robert's flamboyance. At one point, Robert leaned close to Rhaegar, voice lowered, though not by much. "I never expected you'd unseat the old king without a war," he admitted. "Before you led that council or coup or whatever we call it, I used to dream of smashing your father's armies on the field. He gave me reason enough. But you robbed me of my war." He said it with a grin, though behind it lurked something complicated. Perhaps relief, perhaps disappointment that he had not gotten to prove himself in battle. Rhaegar set down his cup. "A war might have cost thousands of lives, Robert. More than a battlefield victory was at stake." "Oh, I know," Robert sighed, wiping foam from his beard. "It's for the best. My thanks for not forcing me to break bones and spill blood. But a man does wonder sometimes. If peace is all we know, will we forget how to fight when it counts?" "That depends on what wars we think might come," Rhaegar said quietly. A fleeting thought of the White Walkers crossed his mind. "I do not believe we've seen the last threat to the realm, but for now we need not tear ourselves apart. Better to be prepared than to be battered." Robert nodded, guzzling the remainder of his ale. "Prepared, yes. That's something Stannis understands better than I ever will." Then he slapped Rhaegar on the shoulder with a force that nearly made the king's cup jump. "Enough talk of gloom. Let's enjoy the feast. Tomorrow we'll see how Arthur Dayne fares in the yard, and if you'd like to join, I'd gladly cross swords with you, king or no." Rhaegar managed a courteous smile. "I'll consider it." The evening wore on, and eventually Rhaegar excused himself, leaving Robert singing a bawdy tune with his lords. He navigated the labyrinth of corridors to the chamber prepared for him. He closed the door behind him, letting the silence settle. The walls of Storm's End were thick, insulating him from the rowdy echoes of the feast. He felt a surge of relief at the solitude. Some nights, being surrounded by so many voices left him longing for a quiet corner to reflect in. He settled on a window seat, gazing out at the storm-lashed sea. Lightning flickered in the distance, white bursts across a black horizon. The wind rattled the shutters. Here, he could almost sense the ancient presence of storms that had battered these walls for centuries. Men came and went, kings rose and fell, but the thunderous seas endured. His thoughts drifted to Elia, to the children, to the father he'd confined. Would Ares still be howling at the shadows tonight? Bran Stark, though Rhaegar did not know the name or the specifics, had subtly guided Rhaegar's life to this juncture, ensuring that the madness which once unleashed civil war instead led to this precarious peace. Rhaegar closed his eyes, letting the rhythmic pound of the waves calm him. At length he sought his bed, though sleep arrived slowly. When morning finally came, the sky had cleared somewhat, and squires hurried to prepare the tilt yard for the melee. Robert had not been jesting about wanting a bit of spectacle. Word spread through the castle that King Rhaegar's men would face the Stormlanders and any knights bold enough to test themselves against the famous White Sword, Ser Arthur Dayne. The yard bustled with energy. Small folk crowded at the edges, craning to see. Robert stood at the forefront with a broad grin, already in half armor, testing the heft of a heavy warhammer. Stannis was there too, more subdued, arms folded, analyzing every fighter's stance. Rhaegar chose not to compete, but he watched from a raised wooden platform. A half-dozen knights of the Kingsguard were present, among them Jaime Lannister, who looked nearly feverish with excitement to test his steel. Arthur Dayne's participation electrified the yard. Whispers flew. The Sword of the Morning was said to be the greatest living knight in Westeros, Master of Dawn, the pale greatsword that shimmered like milk glass. As the melee began, a swirl of weapons and clashing shields, the crowd roared with every blow. Knights formed alliances and then broke them under the press of steel, all in the name of a friendly contest. Jaime dispatched 2 Stormland knights in quick succession, grinning fiercely beneath his helm. Meanwhile, Arthur moved like a dancer. His skill was beyond mortal measure, weaving effortlessly among foes. His sword struck with the surety of a hawk's talons. The only man who seemed eager to challenge him directly was Robert. Robert brandished his warhammer, calling out, "Dayne, face me if you've the courage." His voice boomed, stirring cheers from onlookers. He towered over many knights, thick arms flexing beneath plate. Arthur inclined his head in courtesy and advanced. Rhaegar leaned forward in his seat. He had always wanted to see how the unstoppable force of Robert's raw strength would fare against Arthur's legendary skill. The yard fell into a hush as they met. Robert swung his hammer in a brutal arc, forcing Arthur to leap aside. The blow smashed into the ground, sending up a spray of dust. Arthur riposted with a slash that Robert just managed to parry on the shaft of his hammer. For a few heartbeats, they traded thunderous blows, Robert relying on crushing power, Arthur on impeccable timing and footwork. One slip would end it. In the end, Arthur pivoted around Robert's second hammer swing, then brought the flat of dawn against the back of Robert's helm. Not a lethal strike, but enough to send the Storm Lord sprawling into the dirt with a crash. A roar went up from the crowd, equal parts awe and laughter. Robert shook his dazed head and let out a rumbling chuckle, lifting a hand in capitulation. Jaime, who had circled around to see the confrontation, stepped forward as if to challenge Arthur next. But a blow from another Stormlander took him unawares, striking him square on the helm. Jaime staggered and fell, momentarily stunned. Laughter and cheers erupted again. Soon after, the melee ended with Arthur as the clear victor. Robert rose, removing his dented helm and brushing dust from his beard, grinning broadly. "You fight like the warrior himself," he called to Arthur, who inclined his head in modest acknowledgement. "Next time, I'll tie an anchor to your ankle. See if you can still move so quick." A wave of exhilaration passed through the crowd. No one had died, though bruises and sprains would be plenty. Rhaegar himself descended to the yard, offering a congratulatory nod to Arthur and a hand of support to Robert, who accepted with good humor. "That was a proper contest, Your Grace," Robert said, still breathing hard. "I almost wish you'd taken the field. Show us if Targaryens can handle a hammer to the face." Rhaegar offered a wry smile. "I'll leave that pleasure to braver men than I." Robert barked a laugh and slapped Rhaegar's shoulder again, sending jolts down the king's arm. "We'll make a warrior of you yet." Then his voice dropped, and he glanced around as if ensuring no eavesdroppers were too close. "We should talk soon, in private." Intrigued, Rhaegar nodded. They retreated from the yard, allowing the rest of the castle to celebrate. Robert guided him up a winding set of stairs onto a parapet overlooking the sea. The wind whipped about them, tangling Rhaegar's silver-gold hair and blowing Robert's dark curls across his brow. The horizon stretched endlessly, broken by the dancing whitecaps of Shipbreaker Bay. Robert leaned on the battlements, his expression sober. "Look," he began, voice lower than usual. "I'm no grand thinker. I prefer a good fight and a cask of ale to politics. But I know enough to see the dangers that lurk. Stannis sees them too. My father died too early to teach me all the old ways, but I can see that half the realm is uncertain about your rule, about whether you're truly any different from the Mad King. You seem decent enough, but talk is talk." Rhaegar folded his arms, letting the wind tug at his cloak. "I'm aware. If there's something specific you think I should do to prove my sincerity, name it. The last thing I want is resentment to fester." Robert hesitated. "Well, there's the matter of alliances. Some might see you as vulnerable, especially with your father still alive in that tower. The way I see it, forging a strong bond between the crown and the Stormlands would keep the realm steadier." Rhaegar tensed inwardly. "You speak of marriage alliances, perhaps?" "Aye, perhaps." Robert's gaze flicked out to sea. "I'm not betrothed. My brother Renly is but a boy. My sister is, well, a babe herself, just a child. But in time, if you had a son or a brother, or if you want your own son betrothed to a Baratheon daughter, that might seal a tie that cannot be doubted. I hear your sister, Princess Daenerys, is a babe as well? We might think on matches in a decade or so." The notion jolted Rhaegar. He pictured Daenerys, silver-haired and bright-eyed, a toddler just learning to walk. Could he really promise her a way to the Baratheons? In Dorne, it was normal to betroth children young, but Rhaegar felt a pang at the thought of using alliances to bind the realm. Yet Robert's suggestion was not unfounded. He kept his tone neutral. "I'll consider it, Robert. But remember, children's fates should not be bargained lightly. We have time." Robert exhaled, nodding. "Time, yes, but if we wait too long, the moment might pass. Look, I don't begrudge you wanting to keep your family close. Just know that if the day comes when we're bound by more than friendship, I'd welcome it. Our houses share Targaryen blood from years past, or so they say. It'd be a fitting union of old lines." He drummed his fingers on the parapet, then turned to face Rhaegar more directly. "That said, there's another matter. I hear rumors about your father's men, some who served him faithfully, being restless. Whispers in taverns about how the rightful king still lives, locked away. Have you any plan to address that? You can't keep him caged forever. Someone might try to free him, or worse." Rhaegar's mouth went dry. "It's a dilemma, yes. Executing a king, especially my own father, would be an abomination in the eyes of many. Leaving him free would be madness. Keeping him imprisoned is precarious. As you say, men might still stir up trouble in his name." Robert shrugged, turning away. "Your problem to solve, but a problem nonetheless. If you ever need my help in that regard, you've but to ask." He delivered the words with a casual tone, but Rhaegar saw the glint in Robert's eyes. The Storm Lord would not flinch at a more permanent solution to the question of Aerys Targaryen. Rhaegar forced a smile. "Thank you, Robert. For now, I trust Arthur Dayne and the rest of the Kingsguard to keep him secure. If that changes, I'll let you know." They stood in silence for a time, the wind moaning around them. Finally, Robert clapped Rhaegar on the back again, lighter this time, and said, "Come, no sense brooding on it further. We've a feast to attend tonight and casks to drain." This was a proper day for Storm's End. Rhaegar followed him back inside. He spent the next 2 days accepting Stormlander oaths of fealty, feasting, and quietly feeling out the mood of Robert's bannermen. Most seemed content enough. Some eyed Rhaegar's Targaryen sigil with a hint of suspicion. But Robert's open endorsement and the presence of Ser Arthur Dayne did much to ease old grudges. If Robert's father, Steffon Baratheon, had lived, perhaps the Stormlands would have aligned with Aerys's rule wholeheartedly. But that had long passed. Now it was Rhaegar's hands that held the reins. On the third morning, the royal party prepared to depart Storm's End, carrying modest gifts from Robert and a promise that the crown would see to the improvements of the royal fleet. As they rode away, Rhaegar felt a cautious optimism. The Stormlands would not turn against him, not with Robert's restless nature satisfied by displays of arms and good fellowship. Their return trip took them through the Kingswood. Here, the tall oaks and pines shielded them from the wind. Birdsong filtered through the leaves, accompanied by the jingle of bridles and the soft thud of hooves on earth. The escort was relaxed, though still on guard for bandits. Now that the realm was not embroiled in civil war, outlaws had fewer opportunities, but some corners of the woods might still harbor danger. A subtle hush fell over the group as they neared the old crossroads outside the forest. Ser Arthur Dayne, riding beside Rhaegar, tilted his head. "There's a hush in the animals," he remarked quietly. "A sign of a predator, or something else." Rhaegar reached for the hilt of his sword out of instinct. Jaime Lannister, not far behind, noticed and tensed. But a moment later, the hush broke when a lone traveler emerged from behind a copse of trees. A young woman in rough-spun clothes, leading an old mare by the reins. Her eyes grew wide when she saw the armed knights and the king's banner. She quickly dipped into a clumsy curtsy. "My lords," she stammered. "I meant no harm. Only passing through to see my cousin near Rosby." Arthur signaled for the group to slow. "Peace, good woman. You surprised us, that is all." The traveler nodded, stepping back, her face pale. Rhaegar felt a pang of pity that such a simple soul had to live in fear of armed men. He beckoned a guard to give her a silver stag. "For your trouble, and to see you safely to your cousin." She took the coin with trembling hands, her gratitude tumbling out in disjointed sentences. Then she withdrew beneath the shadows of the trees. The party continued on, leaving her behind, each night glancing about once more for any sign of bandits. But the woods remained quiet. It was a trivial moment, an encounter with a single peasant woman, yet Rhaegar could not shake the feeling that it illustrated the precarious peace of the realm. So many lived in fear of swords. He intended to ensure that fear was not fueled by his reign. They reached King's Landing by dusk. The capital's familiar sprawl greeted them. The ragged rooftops of Flea Bottom, the towering spires of the Great September of Baelor, the yawning gates. People on the streets caught sight of the returning retinue and parted, some bowing, some merely staring. Rhaegar noticed a group of orphans near the mud gate, rummaging through refuse. Their eyes tracked the royal horses with sullen curiosity. Another small reminder of the burdens that still weighed upon the city and the realm. No war had ravaged them recently, but poverty did not vanish overnight. As they approached the Red Keep, the portcullis rumbled upward. Courtiers bustled out to greet them, led by Jon Connington, who looked relieved to see the king's safe return. Elia was not in the courtyard. She avoided the chill of evening these days, but Rhaegar noted servants scurrying to inform her that he had arrived. Connington offered a swift bow. "Your Grace, welcome back. All was peaceful in your absence. If you're not too fatigued, there is a matter requiring your attention in the throne room." Rhaegar dismounted, handing the reins to a groom. "Has it been urgent?" "Only since this morning," Connington said, walking alongside as they entered the Red Keep's halls. "Lord Tywin says a delegation from the Iron Islands arrived unannounced. They demand audience." Rhaegar frowned. The ironborn rarely come so far without reason. Have they given any indication as to why? Connington's expression was grim. "They speak of new leadership under Balon Greyjoy. He's not the official lord yet, as Old Quellan still lives. But Balon apparently is taking a stronger hand. They bring talk of reaving rights, fishing territories, shipping taxes. The sort of nonsense we thought settled. Tywin has contained them in a guest tower for the day, but they grow impatient." Rhaegar sighed. "Very well. Summon them to the throne room. I'll address the matter now." He spared a moment to remove his riding cloak and wash his hands, then proceeded into the cavernous space of the throne room. Torches in iron sconces flickered, casting dancing shadows on the pillars. A handful of courtiers stood arrayed on either side, each curious to see how the king would handle the visitors. Tywin Lannister waited near the Iron Throne, face impassive. At the foot of the throne, 2 knights of the Kingsguard stood on watch, Barristan Selmy and Jaime Lannister, the latter having raced inside after returning from the journey to be present for official duty. Rhaegar ascended the steps and lowered himself onto the Iron Throne, feeling the sharp edges of twisted swords pressed into his back. A moment later, the herald announced, "Lord Dagmar Greyjoy, envoy of House Greyjoy of the Iron Islands." A stooped, rough-bearded man stepped forward, escorted by a pair of ironborn in dull mail. Their faces were stern, eyes reflecting the sea's harshness. Each wore tokens of the drowned god around their necks. Rhaegar inclined his head in greeting. "Lord Dagmar, what brings the Iron Islands to King's Landing?" Dagmar bowed stiffly. "Your Grace, I come in the name of Balon Greyjoy, heir to Pike. He requests that the crown recognize certain ancient privileges, rights to sail and reave beyond the coasts of Westeros, as the Ironborn did centuries past. We also protest new levies on trade through Lannisport and Oldtown that hinder our ships. We ask relief from these burdens, in accordance with old pacts." Murmurs rippled through the court. Tywin's green eyes hardened. The mention of Oldtown and Lannisport was obviously a thorn at his side, as those ports were vital to Westeros's commerce. Rhaegar steepled his fingers. The Ironborn's history of reaving was hardly a proud tradition. The realm has changed much since the days of Harren the Black. Peaceful trade is more beneficial to all. As for new taxes, those were established to support the crown's infrastructure. If your lords believe they're unfair, we can discuss adjustments, but do not come demanding a return to the old ways of pillage. Dagmar's lips pressed into a thin line. "Your Grace, the Ironborn are a proud people. We survive by taking what the sea and the Isles cannot provide. We do not ask to pillage your own coasts, but to reave in foreign waters beyond your domain. where weaker men might yield us spoils. We only ask that the crown turn a blind eye. In exchange, Balon Greyjoy might offer favorable trade on iron, fish, and whatever else we plunder. A hush fell, broken by Tywin's curt cough. Your Grace, with respect, it would be madness to condone these reavings. The free cities of Essos would see it as an act sanctioned by the crown, leading to conflict. We cannot pick and choose which pirates to support. Rhaegar's voice remained calm but took on a sharper edge. Your pleas for reaving rights will not be granted, Lord Dagmar. I cannot allow any vassal of the Seven Kingdoms to become marauders on the high seas. As for taxes, I am willing to hear reasoned arguments, but not demands. Dagmar bristled. Then you leave us no recourse but to petition further. Balon Greyjoy will not be satisfied with this refusal. Rhaegar studied him. Should Balon Greyjoy attempt unsanctioned reaving, he will face the might of the crown. The Iron Fleet would not stand long against the combined navies of the realm, Stormlands, Reach, Westerlands, and Crownlands alike. Advise him wisely. I do not wish conflict, but neither will I permit it. Anger flashed in Dagmar's eyes, but he bowed stiffly. We have delivered our message. The drowned god shall judge which of us holds the stronger tide. Tywin's lips curled in a faint sneer. Take that warning home with you, Lord Dagmar, and remind your masters that it was the Targaryens who crushed the last men who claimed to be kings on Pike. Jaime Lannister stepped forward, placing a gloved hand on the hilt of his sword, as if to encourage Dagmar to withdraw. The ironborn bristled but turned to go. When they had left the throne room, an uneasy murmur spread through those gathered. Rhaegar rubbed his brow. As one crisis ended, another threatened to begin. But so it was for kings. Tywin stepped closer to the throne's base. Your Grace, the Ironborn are seldom idle. If Balon is stirring, we must keep watch. I've dealt with them before, treat them with too much leniency, and they take a league. I suggest we bolster naval presence along the western coasts. Rhaegar nodded. We'll coordinate with the Reach and the Westerlands on that. Send ravens. Lord Paxter Redwine has a sizable fleet at the Arbor, and I intend to see if he'll help patrol the Sunset Sea. Let Balon Greyjoy understand that open reaving will bring swift reprisal. We will not be caught unprepared. Tywin inclined his head. As you will, Your Grace. I'll ensure the necessary dispatches are sent. With that, the court session ended. Rhaegar descended from the Iron Throne, feeling the prickle of its steel behind him. He stepped aside with Jaime and Barristan Selmy. Barristan's voice was measured. The Greyjoys may be all bluster, but a man like Balon might see your father's deposition as a sign of weakness in the crown. He could test it. Jaime nodded agreement, though more boldly. We'll crush them if they do, Your Grace. Rhaegar placed a hand on Jaime's pauldron. Let us hope no crushing is needed. I'd rather not begin my reign with the thunder of warships. But we'll be ready all the same. He left the throne room behind, weaving through corridors thick with tapestries. King's Landing was an endless hive of politics and rumor. On this day, it felt particularly stifling, as though the air itself weighed on his shoulders. By the time he stepped into the solar he shared with Elia, he was nearly shaking with weariness. She was waiting for him there, half reclined on a chaise, reading a letter. Her face lit up when he entered, though her keen eyes picked out the tension in his posture immediately. Trouble with the Ironborn? She asked, setting aside the parchment. Rhaegar leaned down to kiss her cheek. When is there not trouble somewhere, it seems? He dropped into a seat beside her. They wanted reaving rights, whatever that might mean in this day and age. I refused. Elia scoffed softly. Sometimes, I wonder if we should let them reave in each other's waters and call it a day. She reached out and squeezed his hand. You look exhausted. I am, he admitted. But it's nothing a few hours of quiet can't mend. As if on cue, a nurse appeared in the doorway carrying Aegon, who squirmed and reached out to his father with bright eyes. Rhaegar's heart softened at once. He took the child in his arms, letting Aegon tug at the small braids near his temples. Elia smiled, leaning her head against the cushions. That's your remedy. she whispered, nodding to their son. "A bit of innocence to remind you why it matters." He held the boy close, feeling the small heartbeat thrum. In that moment, the troubles of the realm receded. The ironborn, his father's madness, the precarious alliances. None of it shattered the sweetness of a child's grasp. Rhaegar breathed in the faint scent of milk and soap. He wondered if the realm would ever see a day when children like Aegon and Rhaenys and all the others could live unshadowed by war's threat. He would do everything in his power to make it so. That night, he dreamed again of the White Walkers, those pale figures with eyes of cold blue. The dream was eerily vivid. A snowy plain stretching into darkness, an army of the dead moving silently. Then came a swirl of flame. Dragonfire? Or some conflagration from men's alchemy? He saw a silver-haired girl stepping through the ashes, unburnt, though he could not see her face clearly. In the distance, a monstrous horn bellowed, echoing across the icy wastes. He woke with a gasp, heart pounding. For a moment, he was uncertain if he was in the Red Keep or the haunted north. Then he heard Elia's soft breathing beside him. Gradually, he calmed. He had studied old prophecies, gleaned scraps of knowledge from tomes in the library at Summerhall and the Red Keep. He knew the tales of Azor Ahai, the prince that was promised, the idea of a champion who would stand against the darkness. In the old timeline that Bran had altered, though Rhaegar had no direct knowledge of that boy or his interventions, Rhaegar's obsession with prophecy had led him on paths that sowed chaos. Now, he tried to heed caution, to let the realm's peace stand. But the dream unnerved him. The White Walkers were no mere children's story. If they rose again, would Westeros be ready? He saw no immediate answer. Perhaps he should send more men to the wall, see if the Night's Watch needed reinforcements. The Starks might appreciate the gesture. But no sign had yet come from the far north that anything unusual stirred. The wildlings were quiet, the rangers untroubled, so far as the ravens reported. He would not let fear rule him. Still, the dream lingered in the corners of his mind when morning came. In the scriptorium, he pulled out a scroll and drafted a letter to Winterfell, addressed to Lord Rhaegar Stark. In it, he inquired about any unusual occurrences beyond the wall and expressed a desire to ensure the Night's Watch was well supplied. He couched his language in courtesy, careful not to imply that Rhaegar's domain needed the crown's meddling. Then he signed it as King Rhaegar Targaryen, sealing it with the three-headed dragon in red wax. If the nightmares were only nightmares, so be it. But if they were warnings, he would heed them before it was too late. Days turned into weeks. Tywin's ravens flew to and from the Arbor and Lannisport, securing alliances for a stronger navy. Reports filtered in that Balon Greyjoy grumbled, but had not taken overt action. Storm's End was quiet, with Robert indulging in hunts and minor skirmishes against roving outlaws in the Kingswood. The North replied with a polite letter from Lord Rhaegar, stating that all was well, the Night's Watch was stable, and that the wildlings had shown little aggression. Indeed, the realm seemed content. Tenuously, but more content than it had been under Aerys II. In the midst of these developments, a quiet day arrived when Rhaegar decided to finally confront his father. He had put it off too long, always content to let Pycelle or the Kingsguard handle the old king's outbursts. But a father was a father, no matter how mad. Rhaegar needed to see what remained of him, and perhaps glean if there was any chance of a final, merciful resolution. He climbed the tower steps in the early evening, accompanied by Ser Barristan Selmy and Ser Jaime Lannister. The corridor leading to Aerys's chamber was dimly lit by flickering torches. The guards posted outside saluted, stepping aside. One guard unlocked the heavy wooden door. The air that wafted out smelled stale, tinged with the acrid tang of old sweat and fear. Barristan murmured, "Your Grace, shall we wait here, or do you prefer us inside?" Rhaegar hesitated. "Remain by the door," he said softly. "I'll speak to him alone. If I call, come at once." They nodded. Rhaegar stepped through, and the door closed behind him with a decisive thud. The chamber within was large but bare of adornments now. No tapestries, no drapes. A small pallet lay against one wall, a chair by the window shuttered tight. Ares was hunched in that chair, his once silver hair gone tangled and dull, his fingernails grown long and yellowed. He wore a simple robe, though it hung from his thin frame like a sack. At the sound of Rhaegar's footsteps, he jerked his head around. His eyes, once the striking violet of Targaryen lineage, were bloodshot, swirling with paranoia. "You," he rasped, "come to gloat." Rhaegar held his ground, hands clasped behind his back. "I came to see if you have need of anything, father. How you fare." Ares gave a low cackle. "Father? You dare call me father? A usurper sits the Iron Throne while the rightful king rots here." He spat on the floor, or tried to, though his mouth was dry. "Why not kill me? It would be kinder than leaving me in this dungeon." "It is not a dungeon," Rhaegar said quietly. "You have warmth, food, water, and maesters to attend you." "Warmth," Ares snapped. "I burn with it. I see flames everywhere." He clutched at the arms of the chair. "They whisper to me, telling me how you betrayed your own blood. You should have burned with the rest of them." Rhaegar steadied his breath, refusing to be baited by his father's ravings. "Is there nothing left in you that remembers who you once were? You taught me music when I was a boy. You told me tales of the conquerors and their dragons. Do you recall any of that?" Ares's face twitched. For a heartbeat, Rhaegar thought he saw a flicker of recognition. Then the Mad King's eyes darted away. "I recall a boy with silver hair who pleased me with his harp, until he betrayed me. I recall he took my throne with the help of traitors. I recall that he locked me away, and that he will pay for his crimes when the dragons come. They'll come. Oh yes, from the flames they'll come." Rhaegar exhaled, sadness welling within him. He stepped forward, gently placing a cup of water on a small table beside Ares. "Drink," he said. "It will help your throat." Ares lashed out, knocking the cup away. The water spilled across the floor. "No potions. No poisons. You'd like that, wouldn't you, poison to finish me off? Burn them all. Burn them all before they can kill me." He rose from the chair with surprising speed and lurched toward Rhaegar, nails curled like claws. Rhaegar recoiled, but the old king was too weak to cause real harm. He stumbled after 2 steps and collapsed in a heap, panting. Rhaegar bent down to help him, but Ares shrank away, babbling curses and threats. At last, Rhaegar signaled for the door. Barristan entered swiftly, Jaime close behind. They lifted the fallen king and guided him back to the chair. Ares whimpered, tears of rage shining in his eyes. Rhaegar turned away, throat tight. "See that he is fed tonight," he murmured to Barristan, "and make sure the bed is changed." He glanced one last time at the huddled figure that had once been a father to him, then left the chamber, the door clicking shut behind him. The corridor seemed stifling as he walked. Jaime and Barristan followed in silence until they reached the lower stairwell. There, Rhaegar paused, pressing his back against the cool stone. A wave of dizziness threatened to overtake him. He shut his eyes, inhaling deeply. Barristan spoke quietly. "I'm sorry, Your Grace. I served him for years, but I never wanted this for him." Rhaegar nodded without opening his eyes. "Nor I," Jaime added, in a subdued tone. "What will you do?" Rhaegar's eyes opened, focusing on the young knight. "I don't know. Perhaps the maesters can find a draft that calms him, so he suffers less. Beyond that, cannot kill him, Jaime. He is my father, no matter how mad." Jaime lowered his gaze. "Of course, Your Grace." They parted ways. Rhaegar retreated to his solar, determined to bury himself in tasks that would drive out the haunting image of his father's eyes. He read reports on trade, on the new shipyards in Crackclaw Point, anything to block out Ares's rants. But that night, sleep eluded him again. He lay awake, listening to Elia's soft breathing, unable to dispel the sense that the realm's tranquility was built on a foundation of sand. Time flowed onward like a wide, slow river. A moon's turn passed. The ironborn did not rebel. Robert did not raise his banners in any revolt. Tywin handled the day-to-day tasks of governance with an efficiency that both impressed and unnerved those around him. Lord Rhaegar Stark wrote again, mentioning that winter's frosts might arrive early in the north, but no unusual concerns troubled him. Rhaegar found himself almost believing that perhaps the worst storms had been averted. Yet, on a mild afternoon, a raven arrived from the Eastwatch by the sea, reporting that a handful of wildlings had been found dead along the shivering sea coast, their bodies displaying signs of violence and cold. The missive was vague, but it mentioned rumors of pale figures in the night. Rhaegar's heart hammered as he read it. Could it be ordinary bandits, or the unthinkable possibility of White Walkers? The letter was uncertain, laced with fear and confusion. He penned an immediate reply to the Night's Watch, urging them to investigate thoroughly, and to send further word if any sign of the others was found. Then he wrote to Rhaegar Stark once more. Though in his letter he couched his concern in measured terms, privately he feared the dream was no mere nightmare. If the others had returned, all his careful alliances, all his father's madness, all the precarious politics, none of it would matter if the dead marched south. Within a fortnight, another letter arrived from Castle Black. It stated that rangers found more wildling bodies deep in the haunted forest, but no conclusive evidence of White Walkers. Only footprints that vanished in the snow, a scattering of broken weapons, and an unnatural hush in the air. The Lord Commander assured the king that the watch remained vigilant, but noted their diminishing numbers. Rhaegar brought the letter to the small council. Tywin was skeptical. Ghost stories. The wildlings kill each other more often than not. They savage one another, then blame phantoms. Arthur Dayne, standing near, spoke quietly. I've seen how a man's face looks when he truly believes in something terrifying. This letter reeks of genuine fear. Jon Connington frowned. Even if these so-called others are real, they have not threatened the realm proper. Is it wise to alarm the lords with talk of ancient evils? Rhaegar folded the parchment, remembering his dream. I will not ignore any threat, no matter how distant or ancient. The Night's Watch is the realm's shield. If they are weakened, we must strengthen them. I propose we send additional men and supplies. Tywin's gaze narrowed. Recruiting more men for the watch will cost coin that could be used elsewhere. Still, if your grace insists, the crown can cover some expenses. Rhaegar nodded firmly. We have no shortage of gold compared to the cost of ignoring a potential danger. Prepare a royal decree. We encourage volunteers to tack. The Black, offering pardons for minor crimes or debts if they choose the watch, and will fund new fortifications at Eastwatch and the Shadow Tower. The realm must not grow complacent. Jon Connington accepted the directive, though he looked uncertain. As you command, your grace. Let us hope it's only fear chasing shadows. But it will signal the North that you take their concerns seriously. After the council ended, Rhaegar lingered with Arthur Dayne, pacing the corridor. Do you think I'm chasing shadows, Arthur? Arthur's dark eyes were thoughtful. I don't know, but I do know you have a sense for these things, Rhaegar. You always have prophecies, glimpses of a greater destiny. Perhaps you sense something real. In any case, preparing the realm harms no one, so long as we don't push it into panic. Rhaegar touched the pommel of his sword. Yes, and if the day comes that the dead truly walk, perhaps the Seven Kingdoms will stand united, having been spared the ruin of Robert's rebellion or other civil strife. Arthur offered a rare smile. That, my friend, would be a victory beyond measure. So Rhaegar pressed forward with his plan to strengthen the watch, calling upon the lords of the realm to send men, provisions, and coin north. He drafted messages to the Citadel, urging the maesters to research any lore on the Long Night and how the first men once fought the others. Whispers spread through King's Landing that the king was obsessed with old stories, but few dared question him openly. Meanwhile, life in the capital continued. Tournaments were held to celebrate the king's name day. Alya's health rose and fell in waves, yet she remained a steadying presence. Aerys languished in his guarded chambers, slipping further into incoherence. Daenerys grew from a toddling child to a bright little girl, laughing as she chased kittens around the Red Keep's gardens. Rhaenys became a graceful presence at court, and Aegon was old enough to practice with a wooden sword in the courtyard. These were the precious days of peace that Rhaegar cherished more than any crown. In the north, the Starks quietly supported the Watch as winter threatened. Brandon Stark grew into a brash young man, second only to his father in the management of Winterfell's holdings, while Ned Stark was subdued and dutiful, forging an unbreakable friendship with Robert that lingered from their youth in the Eyrie. Although the original extended fosterage had been shortened in this timeline, the bonds remained. Lyanna Stark, free of any scandalous entanglements, roamed the winter snows, riding as she pleased, rumored to be as swift as the wind. Their family stood intact, an unspoken testament to the difference that a single shift in fate could make. Far from Winterfell's ramparts, beyond the wall, rangers of the Night's Watch reported sporadic sightings of pale shapes in the darkness, frozen corpses that moved, whispering through black boughs. But such tales were easily dismissed in the warmer lands. Most lords in the south paid them little heed. Even those in King's Landing who read the king's proclamations saw them as cautionary measures, perhaps inspired by Targaryen fancy. Rhaegar pressed on regardless, determined not to repeat the mistake of ignoring distant threats until it was too late. Time would tell if his preparations would save the realm, or if, in this altered future, an even greater storm loomed on the horizon. Yet, for the moment, the Seven Kingdoms were at peace, spared the carnage of Robert's rebellion. And in a hidden cave far beyond the wall, Bran Stark, the silent architect of this changed tapestry, watched from the ancient roots of the weirwood, hoping against hope that this realm united beneath Rhaegar's banner would hold strong against the doom that crept from the icy wastes. Even as the days shortened and the nights grew colder, the realm, for the first time in generations, seemed poised to stand together. Whether they truly would, only time and the swirl of prophecy could decide. But for now, there were no war drums, no hammered calls to arms from Storm's End or Highgarden, no Lannister host on the march, no crown prince dying on the Trident, and no Targaryen babes slaughtered in the sack of King's Landing. There was only a king determined to save his people from whatever threat rose beyond the horizon, and a realm that, for all its factions and private ambitions, remained unbloodied by rebellion. So the greatest question lingered still. Would this unity endure when the long night truly fell? Yet in the hush of the night, as King Rhaegar drifted off to uneasy dreams, the faint light of hope still glimmered, a single candle in the darkness, unextinguished by the storms of fate. If that candle was enough to guide them, then Bran Stark's intervention had indeed crafted a better song of ice and fire, one that might end not in flames and ruin, but in the dawn.